this afternoon is Joseph Corazzini. Joseph serves as the Assistant Superintendent of Equity, Diversity, and Community Development. Prior to his work in Framingham, Joseph worked with organizations such as Citizen Schools, the Worcester Education Collaborative, Dyname, and the United Way of Central Massachusetts. At the United Way, he served on the leadership team responsible for establishing one of the original 20 Promise neighborhood sites as designated by the Department of Education under the Obama administration. He is an experienced facilitator and community organizer with a steadfast belief in positive youth development. Joseph identifies as a youth worker turned systems agent, change agent focused on improving the formal and informal ways in which institutions work together to ensure the highest quality of access and services for youth, families, and communities. And our panel, our students. Participants on our panel today are all members of Project 351. Project 351 is a nonprofit organization founded by Carolyn Casey that unites an 8th grade unsung hero from each of the Commonwealth's 351 cities and towns in a youth-led movement for positive change. Over a year's term of service, learning, and experiential leadership development, ambassadors scale transformative impact on critical issues, develop the courage and capabilities to lead, and foster the values of empathy, kindness, and inclusion. It's in its first decade of service, Project 351 has engaged 3,753 8th graders as ambassadors and positively impacted more than 780,000 of our most vulnerable neighbors through service. Today's panel features 5 members of Project 351's Alumni Leadership Council, a governance body of high school students who are selected to guide strategy, lead service, and mentor and coach a team of ambassadors through their 12-month leadership journey. Our ALC members represent Boston, Fall River, Medway, Middleton, and Milton, as well as insights gathered from their peers from across Massachusetts. I hand it now to Joseph for our conversation around where do we go from here?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mary, for the handoff. I want to welcome our young people to the panel, Project 351. Our young people, can I see them on the screen? Our beautiful young people, how you all doing? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. All right. So we've got the attention of the state of Massachusetts. It's great to see all of you again. Can we kick off and just say a little hello? Say your name, say your grade, and what school you're representing. Want to start us off with Dominque?
Hi, everyone. I'd like to start off by just thanking M.A.S.S for your continued support of Project 351. And I am a Project 351 alumni, class of 2017, and I'm a rising senior at Milton High School.
All right. Marcus?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Marcus. I am a rising junior at Fenway High School in Boston, and I'm also an alumni member with Project 351, and I am a class of 2018 ambassador.
Thank you. Sreenedhi?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sreenedhi Ravipati. I'm a rising senior at Medway High School, and I'm a part of the class of 2017 ambassadors.
Thank you. Ashley? Let's jump to Justin. We'll come to Ashley right after.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Pianoon. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley. I am currently a senior at Durfee High School, and I'm a class of 2017 Project 51 alumni, and I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Justin?
Thank you. I am Justin from the 51 class of 2017. I will be a senior coming September at Masco High School.
Thank you all. So let's jump right in. So we're in probably one of the biggest civil rights movements of the last 30, 40 years. And you young people are at the center of this work. So with that said, there's plenty of opportunity for some transformational things to happen. But for that to work, I think we have to create more spaces like this for adults to hear directly from young people in terms of what they're experiencing and strategies or ideas that they have in terms of how to make this work move forward. So my first question to you is, what do you want to tell superintendents here today about the national unrest, about what you're feeling or how you're feeling? I'm going to start off with Marcus.
Yeah, so I think one of the main things I would say is, this is a very challenging time for everyone. I think this is one of the boiling points in our nation's history. We have leaders in our country that aren't doing exactly what they should be doing. But, as a member of the African American community, I find it frustrating sometimes when people don't want to talk about the things that make us uncomfortable and the things that make us feel a little bit weird. Because I believe that's how we can move forward into the future and what we can do to, set us up for success in the future. I think through all of this, I was able to attend a Black Lives Matter protest in Boston following the killing of George Floyd. And, during that protest, I saw different people from all walks of life. And, everyone was there uniting out of, compassion, love, spirit. Everyone was so nice to each other. I think that's one of the main things that I enjoyed about it. But I think through all of this, it has opened my eyes to actually see the problems that is going on in this country. But it also gives me hope that one day we can move forward and see a country that one day is like united with love rather than hate.
Hope, that's a powerful word. Ashley, talk a little bit to us. Are you feeling hopeful? And how are you feeling about this national unrest? Sounds like we're having a little technical difficulty. We'll jump to Dominique. Dominique, how about you? You feeling hopeful?
I think for me at least, I think going back to school has me. I think that going.
Ashley, we got a little bit of delay with you. I'm going to come right back to you. I'm going to throw it to Dominique, and then we'll come back to you, Ashley.
Okay. So over the past couple months, we've all seen our country's response to the racism and police brutality that's been going on. And as a young person, this can all instill emotions like fear, disappointment, anger, and sadness. And one thing that personally brings me hope is just seeing what young people have done to channel all of these feelings. Like I've seen works of art, pieces of music, works of poetry, and it's all just been really inspiring to see that young people and students have taken this movement and used their platform to try and create change.
That's powerful. So as we're thinking about sort of these experiences, how we're feeling and sort of the challenges of the conversation, right? Challenges around how do you what does Black Lives Matter mean? We talk about police brutality, like what are we actually speaking about? Are these experiences that we've experienced ourselves? Are they things that we've seen on TV? They're challenging issues, right? They're conversations that aren't easy to talk about. And they also involve relevant matters in terms of truth, in terms of our own individual experiences based on our identities and the communities that we grew up in. And that may differ for a lot of people, right? But if we were to say, fast forward 30 years from now, like if we were able to get Tony Scott, resurrect him from his Avengers untimely death and get him to rebuild that time machine and to take us to a place 30 years from now, Sreenedhi, like what does the school look like differently 30 years from now than what it looks like today? And what would you see then that would make you feel like we have made progress in terms of some of these issues?
I think a large part of that would be that the culture at the school itself would be a lot different. And I think people would be using their background, their culture, their ethnicity, and their looks to build each other up and not to degrade each other. I think that would be a really strong way to direct ourselves in 30 years.
So in terms of the culture being different, because I imagine, I think about it in terms of my conversations with adults in the schools, and no adult wants to create an environment. I believe inherently all adults are good. They want to create an environment where people feel like they're being otherized, meaning made to feel not the norm, right? But how does that interplay out with students? Like, how does it interplay out now within your environment where you see it sort of happen? Because I'm interested in terms of making that shift and change. How, if you don't see it, or you don't know about it, how do you know that it exists, right?
I think the way it plays out right now is mainly through jokes and like teasing each other. And I completely understand friends like having inside jokes and like joking with each other. I think that's completely fine. I don't think that the jokes should be stemming from racial stereotypes. I think that's very rude and like ignorant of people. And I don't think they're really realizing how the receiving end can feel in that situation. So yeah.
Thank you. I want to throw it to Justin. Justin, 30 years from now, what looks different?
30 years. Well, I hope that everybody sees what makes them different, not as an inhibitor to their success, but rather as something that is a superpower. And I'd also like to see schools across our Commonwealth promote service and utilize service learning, because service supports diversity, equity, and inclusion by prompting youth to build empathy, gain respect for the dignity of all, to understand issues of social justice, and also build skills on working on inclusive teams.
Thanks, Justin. Ashley, how are we doing with internet connection? Can you hear me? Thumbs up if you can hear me. All right. It sounds
Yeah, I can hear you.
We're a little bit delayed, so I'm going to throw it to you. Give me how you're feeling in 30 years from now. What's going to give you sort of let you know that things have changed. What are you going to see differently in schools 30 years from now that's going to make you know that things have changed positively?
I think one of the biggest things I want to see change is how we have those so-called uncomfortable conversations that hopefully in the future they become comfortable conversations, and that's something that we can easily do without feeling on the defense about it. I seriously want to see a commitment and an understanding based on respect when it comes to looking at each other from different points of views. I honestly think we have this huge opportunity to make this amazing change. And I think when we base it on respect and understanding, because I think it comes down to things like, especially when we talk about politics in school, it becomes a very heavy, heated topic. And I think people become their feelings get hurt and people explode. I think if we like base our school systems on respect and understanding, especially in that political aspect, we can have students engage in so much more powerful conversations when we base each other and we respect each other's opinions. I think, especially with the up and coming seniors right now, if we become these adults, these people that can help support our school system back onto itself, I think that could be an amazing thing for the future.
Marcus, I see you nodding your head. What's resonating from that statement for you?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with Ashley. I think right now, if I'm looking into the future, because I'm a big vision person, I can, like, in this moment, I have a feeling we have a long way to go. Like, this country isn't even at the start of where we need to be. But I think I'm still holding on to hope that one day, the teens of today, I think that we're very passionate, outspoken, and educated about these types of issues. So I'm looking forward to seeing, the teens of today become our mayors, our governors, our attorney generals, our city council members, the president of the United States, even our superintendents. But I think that, what Ashley said, we have to make these conversations comfortable so that they don't feel weird even after 30 years. And hopefully it happens sooner than we think.
Yeah, these are never easy conversations, and I always like to reference my personal stories whenever I give examples, because I feel like we have to tell stories so people can understand sort of the hardships that we've experienced. Right? We're trying to find those common threads of, even in the midst of talking about our differences, understanding our commonalities. Right? So I always tell the story about my 80-year-old Italian grandmother, and she lives in Arizona now, but prior to this. We'd have conversations every morning for breakfast, and we talk about issues. And I remember the conversation coming up around the gay marriage. And I asked her, I said, what do you think about that? Right. And it was a starkly different conversation than I remember, having with her years before. And she had this deep sort of perspective that was much different. It wasn't as necessarily as where I was in terms of where I'd want her to be, but it was amazing to have her get to a place where she said, I think people just want to love themselves and everybody has the right to want to be loved. And I was like, wow, progress, right? It doesn't necessarily have to look or smell or feel or taste the way that we want it to look. But I think creating the space allows for the actual opportunity for growth. So with that said, how do we grow? We grow from taking one step forward, right? So it's 2020. At some point, you all are going back to school. I'm going back in an office and jumping around from schools. What can superintendents do today, going to this school year? What would you want them to do today that would showcase to you that they're making an actual step to move this work forward? Dominque, I'm going to go to you first, and we're going to go to Sreenedhi after that.
I think just echoing around conversations about race and racial equality, the first thing that we need to do starting this year is to change the culture that we have around having conversations about race. Because when you walk into a classroom or when you walk down your school's halls, you need to feel a sense of security knowing that your voice is going to be heard and your voice is going to be valued. And I think that this sense of security needs to apply to teachers as well as students. Because if you look at the school environment, the teachers are the role models for students. And if teachers don't have that sense of security or are not comfortable talking about differences in race and racial equality, how are our students going to feel comfortable sharing their experiences and their stories? So I feel like this needs to happen.
All right. So when I have conversations with some teachers, though, or principals, a lot of the discomfort they'll say to me is, well, I was never trained in this. I don't know how to have these conversations, so I don't feel comfortable having these conversations. Do you have a response to sort of that? Do you have any ideas of what you might say to them to encourage them to still engage in the conversation?
I think we really need to make an effort into training teachers to know how to have these kinds of conversations.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Sreenedhi, how about you?
I would say really look into the curriculum, because I think there is so much potential for us to learn more about minority groups in our country's history and also just what's going on right now while we're in school in a classroom setting, just to educate each other. Like two classes that I was thinking about, especially that we could integrate this into, is like U.S. history. I remember when I took AP U.S. history, I spent one day on the civil rights movement, which should be like, that should be covering, like, that should have a test on its own. There's so much and it's ongoing. And I think that's such a huge part of our history. Whereas like on factory reforms, we spent a few weeks, and I think there's definitely a lot more we can give to that. And then another class that I was thinking about was like our English classes. We have discussions on like gender. We have discussions on races. We have discussions on multicultural lit and stuff like that. And in my, like, I haven't read a book about a Black life in America. And I think just reading a book on that would be so impactful to so many students to really help them get an insight on what's going on. And I think there's so much potential in our school to like do that. And I think that'd be really great.
Now, we were talking about this earlier, and you had mentioned that that you did a little bit of work outside of school to learn more about sort of the Black experience. Is there one thing that you took away from that experience? Is one thing that you were excited to learn, or that you thought would have been great to have learned in school?
Yeah, I think when I did my own research, I was definitely upsetted by what I learned, because even after slavery was abolished and even after there were some civil rights like reforms made, there was still a lot of negative aspects of what the Black community was facing. But like I was just reflecting on when I'm asked to like give names of white leaders, I have so many people that I look up to that I can talk about. But when I'm asked about Black leaders, before my research, I would have known Martin Luther King and Barack Obama. But like now I know about other people like Fannie Lou Hamer and Medgar Evers, and they're both accomplished civil rights leaders. And I think they should be a part of our like there should be people that everyone knows and not just people who like go out to do research on their own.
Yeah, snaps to support for that. I love that. Ashley, I'm gonna come to you. What can we do today? What can we do today to start working towards that 30-year goal?
I think the biggest thing we can start doing today, especially in terms of, it's that I think people have a hard time of being uncomfortable. And I think we kind of loathe the idea of being uncomfortable, like, oh, I don't want to feel uncomfortable. That's not for me. But it is for you. It's for everybody. I think when it comes to being uncomfortable, you may feel uncomfortable, yet I think you have to expand beyond that. Think about how some African Americans feel uncomfortable when they're being targeted. Think about how some people, when they go out, they feel uncomfortable because they don't know what's going to happen. They don't know if they're going to come home that same day. I think you have to think beyond yourself when you think about being uncomfortable and having those conversations. I think you really have to consider this nation as a whole. I think sometimes we get caught up in the I. I think it has to be more of a we kind of thing. You may feel uncomfortable today, but at the end of the day, it's giving us a better step towards all of us feeling like this is our home, like this, we belong here. I think it should be more of a we conversation than just an I kind of thing. And I think that's the most important step that we can take in terms of having those conversations and making that change. Having more of an overview than just focusing on your own perspective, because there's so much more we can learn from each other in terms of that situation.
And then how do you push adults to get the courage to get into that we conversation? How do you get them to a place where I want to say something, but I'm scared I'm going to say something and mess up, and maybe someone's parent's going to call me and be not too pleased or happy, or that maybe I post something and try to support and somebody sort of misconstrues it? How do you get people past that point of discomfort?
I think the biggest thing we can do, because I think I understand that fear to the full extent, especially now with the whole Karen situation and cancel culture. I understand that fear to the fullest extent. But I think with educators, I think with us students, I think that's a matter of empathy from our side going on to yours. And I think the biggest thing to remember is we know you're trying. We know you care. We know you have no harm intent towards us. We know that you want to do right by us because you've done it since kindergarten. You've been here since the very beginning, and we understand that you're trying, and we understand mistakes happen. I think creating those safe spaces where, especially teachers, like I feel like students especially, it's more of a thing from our side of just understanding that they're trying, they're working hard, they've been here since day one, and they're not going to give up on us now. And I think in terms of just letting your classroom know how you feel, I think it's always like, asking students how do they feel. Tell them how you feel. Tell them that you don't really know how to lead the conversation. Tell them that you're just as worried as them. Tell them how you feel, and they will empathize with you completely. We're not a bunch of monsters. We're going to understand. We know these conversations are hard to have. We understand that to a full extent, and I think that as long as you make it known what your fears are, we can let you know what our fears are as well, and kind of give that back and form that bridge of just like, I give to you, you give to me. I think that's the most important thing, to create those safe spaces.
Thank you, Ashley. Justin, we talked earlier, and you mentioned that you all have already begun some of these conversations through Project 351. What were some of the things that Project 351 did to create that safe space to make you feel comfortable in terms of engaging in these conversations?
Yeah, well, so Project 351, they realized that the reason that these conversations are hard in the first place is because we don't have them as often as we should be having them. So Project 351, we just said, hey, we're going to have this conversation just as we need to have it. So we all got on a big Zoom call. We went into different rooms, and the goal was to listen, learn, reflect, and talk. And that was just pretty much the prompt. And once we got to it, we kept talking. It was a safe environment. No one was going to be criticized for what they were going to say. It was just a time of reflection. So I really do think that the first step is just to stick this on a school committee meeting agenda, or just to email staff and say, hey, we're going to have a meeting about this, and come prepared with a bullet list of things to do afterwards, a checklist.
I want to ask a follow-up question for you, Justin. So in terms of like putting you on a school, because that gets to sort of like what's something that we can do today, in terms of putting you on a school committee agenda. Now, the next piece I'm going to ask is, but how do we ensure that we're centering you and your voice at the center of the conversation? How do we ensure that we're making sure youth are at the center of these conversations to continue to work?
that's a great question. And I think that brings up the importance of stakeholder engagement and making sure that everybody is brought to that table. So whether that means an open invite or engaging with student leaders as a superintendent, just emailing out students saying, hey, we're going to have a school committee meeting on Wednesday. Feel free to join. And as always, there's room for discussion at the end. And I think that's just the first step, inviting students, engaging with students, and making sure that no one is left out or excluded from the table.
I'm going to ask the next question to both Marcus and Dominique, so either you two feel free to jump in on this one. Right now, in the midst of this civil rights movement, the focus and the attention is on Black lives, and it's in response to nationwide outcries from videos that we've seen in terms of Black lives being taken at the hands of people who have been sworn to protect them. But that's only one piece, right? So what do you say to folks who LGBTQ, maybe our indigenous community, our immigrant families, women who are fighting for equal pay? What do you say, or how do you create the space or create a conversation for folks who also are feeling levels of oppression and discrimination? You know, what's the message or the communication to them in the midst of sort of like this movement right now? Like, how do we ensure that we're creating the spaces and the opportunity for them as well?
I think that now is the time where people need to know that now is the time that your voice needs to be heard, because it's been suppressed for so many years. And now is the time for you to share what you want to share, say what you want to say, and what you say will be heard and what you say will be valued. And you need to know that you are a valuable member of this community.
Marcus?
I would say, I think I would simply just say we got you. Like, we will always like stand behind you, and we just need that same energy back in that kind of way where you know, I think certain people are oppressed, but I think we all need to realize that, okay, we're all oppressed. So let's all come together and figure something out and figure out how we can solve this together. But yeah, I think I would simply just say that we got you and we got each other. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, that's all I have.
That's powerful, because oftentimes there can be sort of disputes whenever we're engaging in sort of these conversations around, you know, whose oppression is the greatest, and by no means, and this is important for me to say, that there is historical implications around the oppression and the suffering of Black lives in this country, rooted back through sort of Jim Crow and the new Jim Crow and segregation and slavery. And it's absolutely important to acknowledge the work. So too, in that process is the understanding in which oppression works, right? So it's the idea that if you experience an injustice in your life just based off of your identity or how you choose to be identified, right? That is as equally as unjust, and we should be equally as upset over that, because in effect, the injustice that you have experienced impacts me as well, right? That we can't have systems that are created that benefit only a few, and that if we live in a space where we can ignore the injustice that others face, then we have created a space in which we're creating separation in terms of people within our country. And what that does is it leads to a dehumanizing effect on others who we don't understand or that we may not have grown up around. And that space, that divide, it leaves us with lack of knowledge and information, and only furthers to work against our democracy. So in the act of actually stepping up, into your points, all saying something and doing something, what that does is it calls for accountability around our systems. And accountability doesn't mean that we're holding individual people for the actions of a few. Accountability is that we're holding the system accountable for the actions of all. And that's crucial and important. Now we have a few minutes left, so I wanted to get to my next question because I wanted to hear from you all. So what do you each want your educators to take away and commit to today? So, you know, You've got a chance to speak to superintendents across the state of Massachusetts. What do you want them to know? What do you want your educators to know? What do you want them to take away from today? And what are you taking away from today? I'll throw it to Sreenedhi. Go ahead.
All right, I'll go. So I think what I really want every educator to realize is that every school is different and every school has a different demographic, and what works for one school might not always work for your school. So really figure out, like, work with people in your district, figure out what's going to work best for your district and implement that, so that way change is really impactful at the schools.
Thank you. Ashley?
The biggest thing I want them to take away from today is that I talked about this earlier, but I want to say it again because it's so important. But we know who you guys are. You guys raised us. You're like the second home to us. You know who we are. You know our mistakes. You know our flaws. You know who we are. And I think at the end of the day, we know you're trying, and we appreciate wholeheartedly that you are trying your best. And I think at the end of the day, that's so important. I think the biggest thing to walk away from today is that when schools, especially when we go back, to focus on students in a way that helps them strive. Like, if you know your demographic is mostly white, still like drill that in, because at the end of the day, those kids, they may just be 8th graders today, but tomorrow they're adults who go out there and make friends. They explore the world. You want them to be a person who can survive out there in the real world and be able to make those real connections with different people across different cultures and ethnicities. You want them to be a person who can feel like they can strive in any environment, no matter what their race is. So I think even when it comes to demographics, still instill that principle of, this is what we need to do, this is who we need to be, and this is how we become a better person. So at the end of the day, I think that's one bridge that we still need to cross. We're getting there, we're getting there. There's hope. But yeah, at the end of the day, don't be afraid to also let us know. Like, if you don't understand something, like, I know sometimes we get into this whole, like, we have our own little lingo and things like that. Like, don't be afraid to ask us questions and cross that bridge with us. Like, get really comfortable with ask those questions. We're going to giggle. Yeah, we're going to have our little giggle here and there. But at the end of the day, we respect it so much more when you try to understand us and where we're coming from. And we're going to appreciate it way more than anything else, So especially coming back, even one thing you can probably focus on is, I stress so much, is like coming back, mental health, and like maybe getting a few psychologists in there, especially for kids who feel a little bit traumatized by this whole situation. Getting those people in there in the school system, especially the first few weeks, I think would be an amazing thing to take away from this whole thing.
That's powerful. And there's ways in which, and I'll throw in just a comment on that, because you have me, so like, I'm reading all the comments from the that are around some of the superintendents that are saying how amazing you all are and how powerful this is, and the appreciation in terms of the thought, in terms of especially creating the vulnerability for them to be able to have these conversations. There's ways in which superintendents can be intentional in terms of taking a first step, to your point, Ashley, prioritizing the work. Affinity groups for students, whether it's the Gender Sexual Alliance, whether it's the Black Student Union, you can look at your data demographic and speak with your students and ask them about, what do they want? And what you're going to find is that people are looking for a place to feel, comfortable, right? So how are we using our stipends? How are we creating spaces at all of our secondary schools, not just at the high school? Because I'm sure a lot of you could speak to middle school experiences of feeling otherized, right? Like not feeling like you're necessarily part of the in crowd, and having people look at you different because you in fact may do things differently, and which we all do, right? So that's a place where I would encourage a lot of superintendents to sort of look into their district. How much space are they creating for students with common identities to have safe spaces with an adult to start to just, build relationships and build community. Marcus, I want to come to you because I haven't heard from you for a while. So, walking away from today, tell me, what do you want educators here to commit to?
I think I want all the superintendents on the call to just be really committed to getting back into each of their schools in their districts, of course, when it's safe to do so. And I would the The next piece I would say is hire diverse staff members that kind of like reflects your school community. Because I find that if someone looks like me when I walk into school, I kind of feel a little bit motivated to actually go to school every morning. And, you know, I've read some statistics that say if students see someone that looks like them in school, you know, it could possibly positively impact their attendance and their grades in school. And I would say try to make yourself available for students to share their personal experiences. Um, you know, try to listen more than responding to them. I think just taking the time to actually just think about what they're telling you and them sharing their experiences and being vulnerable, I think that's pretty powerful. And I know students can sometimes seem intimidated by superintendents because they're kind of like the authority figure of the district. Um, but I think the key here is to make yourself known and actually being able and wanting to know that your students have some powerful things to say.
Yeah, that's definitely powerful. And making yourself known is sort of one step. And the next steps that I'm going to push even further is how are superintendents creating an actual platform for those individuals like yourselves who are trying to be known in terms of providing feedback, constructive feedback in terms of the work of the district. When you're looking at policy, do you have a student group that's from the high school, secondary level that may be reviewing policy to give feedback on some policy? Even in terms of budget or some of your committees, are you ensuring that there's spaces for young people to actively be participants within that work? And remember that, you know, our young people work best when they have peers around them for support. So creating cohorts that allow them to participate within that process. Powerful stuff coming from you all today. Thank you. Justin, commitment. Take us
Well,
call to action. What do we need to do?
so I'm the math team captain at my school, so this one's a little bit mathematical by nature, but I hope that there is a greater focus on studying data pertaining to discipline, to dropout rates, and to test scores and how they align with different demographics. Because once we can establish that statistical baseline, then we can really talk about bringing change and create resources and strategies to address bias and increase equity.
Do you feel like, in your personal experience, and like, do you see a difference in terms of like the way in which people are treated in school?
Well, personally, I not in my school because I tend to, um, I don't know, my school has not a very high level of diversity, and I'm not sure if I'm the best one to answer that question. But what I have seen is teachers doing all that they can to encourage students equally. And I think even then, there still is issues with equity, with problems at home. Like maybe certain people don't have Wi-Fi at home, and there's just so many systemic problems that have to be addressed as well.
So I'll throw it out to the rest of the group. Have you experienced some of those differences? Do you see those differences in school? And is there a way in which you, or example that you have that you can showcase if you have, or if you haven't, you know, let's hear.
I think I can speak to the need to have diversity on like all levels of education because I'm from Milton, which is a predominantly white, predominantly affluent town. And my town has 4 elementary schools. So I was kind of thinking about the in 30 years, what do I want to see? I kind of turned the time machine back a little bit to elementary school. The elementary school that I went to is the most diverse culturally, racially, socioeconomically. Like I'm lucky enough to say that my first Black teacher was my kindergarten teacher. And I know that a lot of people can't say that. And it's when I got to middle and high school, I just saw that that level of diversity wasn't exactly there. And some of the attitudes that people had toward my school in particular were negative because of the level of diversity there. And I just wanted to say that as a rising senior, I guess just kind of reflecting on my educational experience, it's really disappointing to see that my most diverse educational experiences were in elementary school. So I think that there really is a great need for diversity and just exploration of more cultures in education.
That's powerful, especially because diversity both in terms of sort of race and beliefs, is also important in terms of diversity of thought, right? And I think oftentimes we talk about diversity in the context of race, but also not realizing that inherently, because of our race, we have different experiences, and that diversity of thought is just as crucial in terms of being able to shape the minds of today and tomorrow to be ready for a world that's going to call for them to have an ability to process and think differently based on the context of like their environments. So last call, final word. Words of wisdom. Sreenedhi, take us away. What do you have?
My biggest thing is I think these conversations, as brutal as this can sound, I think it needs to start at a younger age, because whether we want to accept it or not, there are elementary school students and like early middle school students who experience racial injustice towards them while they're at school. And I know it's a really tough topic to talk about even as a high schooler sometimes. So it's definitely a lot more brutal to talk about with elementary students, but these conversations have to start at a younger age so that way it stays with them and less people experience it from the beginning on.
Thank you. Ashley, 30 seconds or less. Take us away. Final words.
Okay, final words would be for me is that I think this is amazing. I love this right here. I'm so glad to be here. And I think the biggest thing we want to take away from this is that when we get back to school, we're going to make some mistakes. There are going to be some ugly mistakes that are going to happen. I think we need to take that with full consideration that it's going to happen. Teachers are going to mess up. Students are going to say things that aren't so nice. You're going to have that. But I think at the end of the day, the biggest thing that I want all schools to take away from today is that transparency is the biggest thing ever. Vulnerability right now isn't a thing. Like, you have to put it out there. You have to put yourself out there. And when bad things happen, don't shield them away from it. Introduce it to them. Even if they're like the younger students, don't shield them. Introduce it to them. So when they're older, it's not uncomfortable anymore because they've heard it. They know about it. And when things at your school happen that aren't exactly the best things that they don't show your school in the best light, don't be afraid to tell students, yeah, this happened. We took care of it. This is what happened. And be fully transparent, because if otherwise, you won't be able to form that trust with them that they think they can rely on you to be there for them when they need you to be. So transparency, number one thing.
Thank you, Ashley. Justin, 30 seconds or less. Take us away.
I think that we have come so far just to learn so much from these incredible people in front of me that are teenagers. It's incredible. And I think my final word of wisdom would be, we have come far, and it's great that we're having this conversation right now, and let's not stop this momentum. Let's bring it back to our communities, to our school districts, to our towns.
Thank you. Marcus?
I would say just have hope. I know that our world is kind of dark and scary right now, but I think that we're moving slowly, very slowly in the right direction. And I think one day we're going to finally see the result of fighting this hard and having these types of conversations. So I think just hold on, like hope is coming.
Thank you. Dominque, close us out.
I would say, as kind of a challenge to the superintendents and the educators on the call, I would say invest in the resources that are going to uplift your students so that they are in an environment where they can learn and be in a supportive environment.
Awesome. I want to say thank you to all of our panelists. You all are just simply amazing. And I'm always impressed with young people. I'm super impressed with the level of thought and the vulnerability that you shared with us today. I want to thank M.A.S.S, Mary, Erica, Tom. I want to thank Carolyn Project 351 for the amazing work that you do in the community. I just want to encourage superintendents that these are important conversations. Just remember that in the event where you feel scared or you feel nervous and you recognize there's going to be pushback from your community, look to our young people whose courage and work and commitment can be a shining light and an example of how we can push through these things. It's a hard, challenging time. I know you all are doing an amazing job in terms of trying to get us back to schools. I want to make sure we're also keeping the light in terms of these important conversations and issues that are occurring in our community. So thank you. And I think I'm throwing it to John Doherty, who's taking us to the next.